Happy Friday, everyone. It's Friday, March 27th. Hey, you made it through week one of online learning. Go you. All right, so I just want to go over the end of the week with you and tell you where we're going next week. Today, we are going to look at the introduction and foreword in The Great Gatsby. So I hope you all have your copy out ready and you're ready and raring to go. You'll notice I am doing this the night before, so my video is not posted yet, but you will see the link here where you'll be watching me, right now, tomorrow. So, while we read any of the text, I would like you to open this link. If you have a printer, awesome, print this. If not, try to have it just pulled up in your window if you're working on a desktop. Or maybe kind of save it, take a screenshot and save it as a picture on your phone. But as we read, we're going to be going through these things and annotating. So I'll go over that in a minute. I want to go back to the plans. But basically, I am so proud of the work that you've done this week. Your threaded discussions have been awesome. Your quiz was great. I really hope you got a sense of what the early 1900s, 100 years ago, can you believe it, was like for us in the 1920s, and reading your responses was really cool. Today, I hope you got a good idea of what The Great Gatsby is going to be about without too many spoilers. But I know that it was hard for you to just read through this and not have me adding on and elaborating, but you'll get the main gist through looking at that Prezi PowerPoint over The Great Gatsby. Okay? So don't forget, if you did not respond to threaded discussion question number 2 on Classroom, which I believe was about the extremely wealthy, there was a question related to that. Please make sure you respond to 2 other people by tomorrow. You'll see that is due on Classroom. Okay. Threaded discussion number 2 due by midnight tomorrow night. All right. Again, great week. So proud of you. I'm going to tease you. We're going to start with a little introduction and forward today with The Great Gatsby. And then chapter 1, we are going to start on Monday. I'm so excited. Looking into next week, I would like to do a Google Meet with you. I'm getting really good feedback from my other classes that's something that they would like to do, where we all log in and get to see each other. I think that would be great. We are human beings and we need social interaction, even if it's from a screen at this point. So let's try, and I will try and schedule a Google Meet or Zoom call early next week. So be on the lookout for that. All right, let's pull up this annotating bookmark really quick. And not so much in the introduction and the forward, but when we start chapter 1, I would like you to annotate. In case we do come back, I'll be checking your annotations. And I think it's good to help you be an active reader anyway. So don't be afraid to mark up the text. Have a couple different colored pens, sticky notes, highlighters, whatever you need, okay? So any questions you have about the text that you want to bring up in our Google Meet discussions, write a question mark. Star things that you think are important. Write 2 question marks or circle unknown words. The Great Gatsby is a difficult read. Fitzgerald uses high lexile vocabulary words. So circle words you don't know. Look them up so that you can comprehend what you're reading there. Okay. You could do a P for plot, points in the story. Something, if you had me for writing one, you probably remember DIDDLES. DIDDLES is an annotation acronym where we look at the author's word choices, that's diction, imagery, any language that appeals to our sentences, details, the facts, and language, the author's language, is it conversational, plain, poetic, specific, old-fashioned, etc. Okay. And then syntax, which is sentence structure. Does Fitzgerald write in choppy sentences, short, simple, long, parallel? You'll know that he writes in long, descriptive sentences. So we'll talk about syntax as we go through it. And then we're also going to look for the tone. What's the author's attitude versus the mood, what you feel? Oh, you're going to feel some anger in this book, let me tell you. And then theme, big ideas. Oh my gosh, the quiz. What did we learn from Fitzgerald's life? All of those themes that you stated in that last quiz question, awesome. Okay. We're definitely going to see money is the root of all evil in this book, and definitely some racism. Okay. So that's your bookmark. Leave it up. And if you could follow me, we are going to let's go ahead and open your book. If you look here, we'll walk through the pages together. Take a look at this quote on the title page. Then wear the gold hat, if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce for her too, till she cry, lover, gold-hatted, high-bouncing lover, I must have you. I want you to think about what that quote means by Thomas Park d'Invilliers, which is French. It kind of sounds like impressing a girl, doing whatever you can to get the girl. And that's interesting because that is really what this book is all about, getting the girl. So flip over to the next page here. You'll see that this was first published in 1925. Crazy. It's dedicated to Zelda, which is Fitzgerald's wife. And we're going to start the introduction together. So if you could be on page Roman numeral 7 there, get your pen out, have that handy, and I'm going to read this introduction to you by Jesmyn Ward. And if you don't want to listen to me, then you can pause it and read it on your own, but I think it's good that you listen along so you can star things and annotate things. I first read The Great Gatsby as a teenager. I imagine this is when most Americans encounter F. Scott Fitzgerald's seminal work. Yep, you're teenagers. Our teachers, rightly so, hail the novel as a masterpiece, so we read it under their influence when we are young. Or we read it. We read it when we are bewildered and delighted at our changing bodies, flushed with burgeoning sexuality, heady with the certainty of our ascendancy, the prospect of our future greatness shining off in the distance like a great green star. Circle that word green because that color is hugely symbolic in this novel. Also think about it. It's true. This is an American classic, if not the American novel. It's taught in all junior American literature classes across the country, and I want you to think about why. It is easy for young people to see themselves in Gatsby, the character. If you look on your screen right here, there he is. Okay. It is easy for young people to see themselves in Gatsby. His earnestness is familiar. His ambition, twinned with desperation, resonates with any teenager who wants to journey off to college or move states away for work in a bid to escape the boundaries of their youthful life. So just like you all have goals and aspirations, so does our main character here, Gatsby. I'll put a circle on his face right there. Poverty made Gatsby ravenously desperate for difference, for possibility. Some, perhaps from similar circumstances, will recognize that and see themselves. Others will empathize because they feel driven away by parents who don't understand them. This author's talking to you. Are you hearing her? By peers who underestimate or limit them, by the larger culture that ostracizes them for one reason or another. Their hearts will be, as Gatsby's was, in a constant turbulent riot. Direct quote from the text. The instinct toward future glory leads them out into the world. They burn to flee, to grow beyond their birth circumstances. When she says they, she means you. Okay, so this she's talking to you about what you're experiencing in life right now. In some ways, adolescence is one great flight. Teen readers are especially understanding of Gatsby's fixation on recreating that moment in his life when it was most open to possibility, when he could become and do anything, when he believed that if he worked hard enough, he could remake himself. Do you believe that about your life? He could ascend to a different social class, a class where life seemed to be an enchanted necklace, each moment a pearl on an endless string. It seems to be a universal sentiment of youth. The belief that one can become anything given the luxury of time and focus. Young readers walk down tree-lined Louisville streets with Gatsby and Daisy. Gatsby, you look up on the screen here, and Daisy. our two main characters, as the leaves fall. They see a ladder mounted to a secret place above the trees. Once there, he could suck on the pap of life, gulp down the incomparable milk of wonder. Wow, that's a giant metaphor. The young know that golden moment when anything can happen, and they understand its allure because they are living it. So true. Like you're in the most golden moments of your life right now, right? Or at least to start. By the end of the book, the reader's empathy has burned to love. Young readers fall for Gatsby's passion, his insistence that life should be relished, should be executed well. They have fallen in love with the persistence of his devotion to Daisy. He is obsessed with her. Okay, that's part of the whole book, chasing her. I imagine they like to think they are capable of such a great love, one that smolders, lasting from year to year. They adore Gatsby so much, you feel a quiet disdain for those who do not possess his virtues, perhaps most of all for Tom. Here's Tom right here. Ooh, you're gonna hate him. Who embodies the worst excess of the moneyed elite, the misogynistic, and the racist. They pity Nick. I don't have him in the... Oh, wait, yeah, I do. Wait. Oh, there he is. They pity Nick because they understand he has fallen in love with Gatsby. Ooh, what does that mean? The idea of Gatsby, or does he really love him? And understand that Nick doesn't deserve Gatsby. Even though he insists he is not carelessly violent like Tom or Daisy, the young understand Nick is as much a product of his social class as Tom, that its backwardness and insularity marks him as much as it does Tom and Daisy. But the experience I had while reading The Great Gatsby as an adult was very different. And folks, I can tell you this too, that's so true. When I read it in high school, I was like, what? And as an adult, every time I read it, this will be my 14th time reading it, I just fall in love with it over and over. I would argue my older reading was deeper, more emphatically felt. While most young people admire Gatsby's youthful love for Daisy, for the possibility associated with her economic and social class, and for who he was with Daisy too in that shining moment in time, there is much subtext that becomes clearer with age. Subtext Fitzgerald must have been acutely aware of at the time he wrote The Great Gatsby. So what does that mean, folks? I want you to circle the word subtext. It means there's a hidden message in what Fitzgerald's trying to tell you about life, and it's your goal to find it. One of the first great lessons of my adulthood was this: I change. As I grow, my dreams change, as do my ideas about who I can be and what I want during the short time I am alive. Gatsby has not learned this. It is a lesson he has closed himself to. From the moment he meets Daisy, his ideas about who he is and what he wants and what he can become are immutable. It's ironic that he is so in love with the moment of great possibility in his youth, the moment he kissed Daisy, but his love for that moment has rendered all other avenues of possibility impossible, has fossilized him, sealed him in amber, turned him to stone, made it possible for him to see only one version of himself. Do we only have one version, folks? No, we're constantly changing. Poor Gatsby tends to be stuck in his past. After years of underhanded dealing in shady business, Gatsby is wealthy, popular, feared, and respected. On West Egg, which is really just a part of New York City, he hosts glittering parties where old money and new money engage in raucous revelry together. He owns the newest, most exquisite cars, and he has mannerisms and a wardrobe to match his new social station. When we meet Gatsby, he has worked furiously to make himself into the man who, on the surface, high society would have deemed a good match for Daisy. And in the end, this immutability, this blindness to change, to the fact that Gatsby can only picture himself as one thing, limits him. It is almost as if Gatsby's inability to recognize opportunities for change in himself means he can't acknowledge it in others either. When he meets Daisy again, he only sees the girl he fell in love with. He cannot understand that she isn't the same person she was because so much has occurred in her life. She has been married for a number of years, and she has a child. The accumulation of days spent shaping herself to her husband and caring in her careless way for her child have changed her from the girl she once was. Nick sees this in her, in the way she speaks, with fluctuating, feverish warmth. But Gatsby's love for her girl means he can only hear the youth in her voice, and he is deaf to the age in her words. Adults understand this intrinsically, marked as they are by the years, time wreathing them in layers, an onion growing round and waxy in the earth. Likewise, I think this is why Gatsby underestimates the extent of Tom's malice and the perfidy of the social class he has fought to become a part of. And that, perhaps, was the idea most invisible to me as a young reader, that the very social class that embodied the dream Gatsby wanted for himself was predicted on exclusion, that Gatsby was doomed from the start. Oh, he'd been born on the outside, he would die on the outside. Hungry as I was to escape my own little nowhere country town, my own poor beginnings as a teen, I could only see Gatsby's yearning. I was too young to know his wanting is wasted from the moment he feels it. The seasoned heart aches for James Gats, that's his real name, the perpetual child, the arrested romantic, bound by one perfect moment to failure. This is a book that endures generation after generation because every time a reader returns to The Great Gatsby, we discover new revelations, new insights, new burning bits of language. Read and bear witness to the story's permanence, its robust heart. Read and bear witness to Jay Gatsby, who burned bright and bold and doomed as his creator. Read it, by Jesmyn Ward. So, folks, this is so true. Before we take a little brain break here, I'm going to have you pause the video and get up and move before I read the foreword. So true. This is all about goals, chasing your dreams, realizing who you are. And I encourage you, we're going to read it together as 17-year-olds, but when you're in college, read it again. When you're in your late 20s, read it again. When you're in your 50s, read it. It's a story that is timeless and teaches us so much about life over and over and over. All right, let's pause the video, take a little 2-minute brain break, and we're going to get into the foreword together. Okay, welcome back, folks. Hopefully you stretched a little bit. We're going to read this short foreword here, written by Eleanor Lanahan. And this is F. Scott Fitzgerald's, our author's granddaughter. So follow along with me. Feel free to highlight, underline, star anything that you feel is important. It is my great honor as F. Scott Fitzgerald's granddaughter to crack some literary champagne over this edition of The Great Gatsby and launch this great American novel in its purest form, masterfully restored and as close as possible to Scott's original intentions. I never met my grandparents. Scott died young in 1940 at the age of 44. I was born in 1948. Zelda wrote my mother from Highland Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. I longed to see the baby, but she perished in a fire a couple of months later. Fortunately, both of my grandparents left such a trove of intimate letters and blazingly honest essays that I feel I have come to know them. By the time Scott began to write The Great Gatsby, he had already produced 2 highly autobiographical novels. Hint, hint, The Great Gatsby's pretty autobiographical. In 1923, he wrote his editor at Scribner's, Maxwell Perkins, that he wanted his 3rd novel to be different. I want to write something new, something extraordinary and beautiful and simple and intricately patterned. Although Gatsby is a work of his imagination, Scott's experiences, along with those of family and friends, are elemental to the book. My mother, Scott and Zelda's only child, appears early in the story. When Daisy, if you look at the screen here, right here, these two are married. When Daisy gives birth, she says, I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. This is uncannily similar to what Zelda said in 1921 as she emerged from the ether of childbirth. Isn't she smart? She has the hiccups. I hope it's beautiful and a fool, a beautiful little fool. Of course, my mother was no fool. She was christened Frances Scott Fitzgerald and called Scotty. So already, if you want to star this paragraph here, we already see how F. Scott Fitzgerald, uses a quote from his own wife in the novel. In my next incarnation, my mother wrote years later, I may not choose again to be the daughter of a famous author. The pay is good, and there are fringe benefits, but the working conditions are too hazardous. I suppose it is impossible for writers to form the habit of inventing people, building them up, tearing them down, and moving them around like paper dolls, without doing somewhat the same thing with live ones. Good writers are essentially nutcrackers, exposing the scandalous condition of the human soul. Scott was a devoted and difficult father. He was virtually a single parent when my mother was a teenager. He tried to dictate what she read. He tried to supervise her manners, her interests, and her friends. Scotty wrote, "My father had a terrific sense of wasting his own life, his youth, and he was trying to prevent me from squandering my resources as he felt he had squandered his." She admitted that at Vassar College she sometimes didn't open his letters, but was wise enough to stash them in a drawer. "Isn't it odd," she continued, "that the letters he wrote me, so full of advice and wisdom, but to me plain harassment, have taken their place alongside his more famous writings?" As a teenager, my mother avoided talking about her father because his reputation was thoroughly tarnished by alcoholism. She ignored her parents' problems by forming a dramatic group at Vassar, immersing herself in a lively social life, and dating her future husband, Lieutenant Jack Lanahan. Scotty was 20 when Scott died suddenly in Hollywood. He was almost penniless, except for the $700 hidden in his bookshelf and a small veteran's pension for Zelda. The Great Gatsby was no longer available in bookstores. The revival, though, came slowly. His Princeton classmate Edmund Wilson edited Scott's notes for his partially completed novel, The Last Tycoon, and it sold respectably. The biggest boost for The Great Gatsby came when it was issued as an armed service edition, a small pocket-sized paperback, and given to 150,000 soldiers during World War II. That introduced The Great Gatsby to all those young American men and their families. By the mid-1960s, Scott's books were being included in college curriculums. My mother hid from any reflected glory. We lived in Washington, D.C., where she wrote a column for the Northern Virginia Sun and later for the Washington Post. The only time Scotty allowed her identity as the daughter of to be disclosed was on the campaign trail. Stumping for a favorite candidate and knowing her father's name now opened doors. She claimed to have the hide of a rhinoceros when it came to hearing strangers' opinions about her parents' work or unsolicited diagnoses of her mother's mental illness, but she wanted to shield us children from any negative fallout of their legacy. I wasn't encouraged to read The Great Gatsby, and I don't think our mother wanted us to grow up feeling we were related to anybody special. When I was about 9, my mother read us The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I loved. A couple of years later, Life magazine ran a story, "The Spell of F. Scott Fitzgerald Grows Stronger." We 4 grandchildren were photographed in the attic playing with Zelda's turquoise ostrich feather fan and arranging Scott's battalion of lead soldiers. For the camera, we held up Zelda's brilliant paper dolls, each with a costume appropriate to the court of Louis XIV, King Arthur's Round Table, or the extravagant finery of fairy godmothers. Eventually, it became embarrassing to know nothing about my grandparents. I was 17 when a young writer asked if I agreed that The Great Gatsby, more than any other novel of its era, had essentially lost nothing with the passage of time. I had no idea. In my freshman year of college in self-defense, I read all 5 of his novels, along with a few stories in Arthur Meisner's biography. I was especially awed by Scott's pitch-perfect use of language, as when Gatsby kisses Daisy. He knew that when he kissed this girl, and forever wed his unutterable visions to her perishable breath, his mind would never romp again like the mind of God. So he waited, listening for a moment longer to the tuning fork that had been struck upon a star. Then he kissed her. I can't account for all the reasons people love The Great Gatsby, perhaps for its champagne parties and of course for its glitz, elegance, gorgeous cars, enormous estates, and Gatsby's vast collection of shirts. I remember my mother telling me she thought The Great Gatsby was popular with college students because it is a short book and an easy read. It was popular in Russia too. She speculated they liked to use it as an example of capitalism gone awry. My mother didn't live long enough to explain Gatsby's popularity in Japan, where the Takarazuka Revue staged an all-female performance. The Great Gatsby has been adapted to ballet and opera. Its symbols have been anatomized, its themes have been explicated, but Gatsby remains timeless. He stands in the dark, watching the green light, circle that's hugely symbolic, that green light, on a dock across the bay. At the age of 27, at Zelda's death, my mother became the sole guardian of her parents' estate. Thanks to her gift of her parents' personal papers, photographs, and manuscripts, Princeton University now boasts an extensive archive. That collection has largely made this volume possible. Herewith is the best possible reading of this American classic. Professor James L. W. West III contributed years of scholarship to these judicious emendations. And now it's time to let Scott speak for himself. All right, folks. There you have it, the introduction and foreword. I'm so excited to start chapter 1 with you on Monday. Have a great weekend and see you next week.